Hi, it's Christina with the Sisyphean Journal. Today's May 11th, and we are going to look at a case where just about everybody really let this young woman down. A lawsuit filed by Frank Dillon, father of 22-year-old Barbara Dillon, noted that she underwent what was supposed to be a safe, legal abortion performed by Dr. Mark Silver at Long Island Gynecological Group on April 18th of 1981. Now, they very professionally sent the tissue from the abortion to a laboratory where it was analyzed, and they found placental tissue but no fetal parts. This, of course, indicates that she was indeed pregnant, but the fetus wasn't removed. So there are a couple of possibilities. One is that she had an ectopic pregnancy, which an abortion isn't going to do anything about, or the abortion just completely missed the fetus and she had retained tissue. In either one of these scenarios, this is potentially deadly. She needs immediate care. And the pathology lab notified Long Island Gynecological Group, but nobody bothered to notify Barbara. So Barbara was in a lot of pain starting on May 5th, pain and bleeding. And she tried to just suck it up and deal with it. But on May 10th, she finally went to the emergency room at Kingston Hospital. She was treated with antibiotics by a doctor who, I'm very sorry, I'm going to butcher his name. I'm going to do the best I can. Dr. Kalyana Sundaran Venkataraman. I'm going to call him Dr. V so I don't continue butchering his name. So he gave her some antibiotics and advised her to see the hospital gynecologist, Dr. Theodore Jackaway. He was the on-call gynecologist for the hospital, to call him for follow-up care. Well, later that day, Barbara was still in a lot of pain and she was throwing up, so her roommates called the emergency room and were told to give the antibiotics more time. Well, at about 5:30 the next morning, May 11th, Barbara was in so much pain that one of her roommates called Dr. Jackaway's answering service and left a message. Jackaway called back and said he wasn't going to take any responsibility for Barbara because she wasn't his patient. He hadn't seen her. He suggested taking her to the emergency room. Now, her friends should have taken her to the emergency room, but, in retrospect, it probably wouldn't have helped, and you'll see why. About 3 hours later, they contacted a neighbor who called the University Health Center, and there a Dr. Welton asked for somebody to bring her in so he could examine her. She got there at about 9:25, unconscious, and no pulse, no blood pressure, no respiration. So somebody started some resuscitation attempts because she did make it to the hospital alive. And Dr. Welton called the hospital and he spoke to Dr. Jackaway, who again is the gynecologist at the hospital. She was a patient at that hospital. He said he wasn't going to see her because she wasn't his patient and he didn't want to get involved. Dr. Welton tried calling a Dr. Kirk for a consultation, and he refused to do a consult, but he did call Jackaway and convince him to treat Barbara. Well, he tried to convince him to treat Barbara. Finally, at 11:45 that morning, somebody brought Dr. V back into the case. He performed emergency surgery, but despite his efforts, Barbara went into irreversible shock and died. Now, an obituary for her said that she died on the 13th, but I don't see how she could have hung on that long with irreversible shock. So I don't know whether she died on May 11th, the day of the surgery, or whether she lingered for a couple more days. And of course, it turned out in retrospect that Barbara had an ectopic pregnancy, which the clinic had failed to detect during the abortion, and nobody bothered to find afterward. So Barbara's father sued Silver, Jackaway, Klein, and Long Island Gynecological Group. So this is just the university physician and the pathologist were the only medical professionals who didn't let her down. It's really tragic and inexcusable.